Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Cooperative. We talk about the benefits of cooperative, the cooperative business model, mainly for creating financial and social wealth. And this morning in the studio, we have Miss Kate Mereand, and she is the program manager of technology and innovation at the Department of Small and Local Business Development. And they are, the goal, I would say, Kate, is where you're trying to create businesses and keep old businesses so you can create community wealth. Is that it?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell us how you got to this job? How did you get here?
Mm-hmm. Early in my career, I spent a lot of time with child welfare, foster care, and adoption for about 7 years. And in doing that work, really understanding that social services on their own aren't enough to support communities, and really wanting to look at the question of economic justice and economic wealth. So I went back to law school, and in law school I focused on something called antitrust and then consumer protection, trying to understand the full scope of what's necessary for communities to thrive.
Economic justice and antitrust, they don't seem to go together to me. How does that fit?
So antitrust, which originally was created in the United States, was the idea of understanding when people lock in market power, how that creates inequality.
Monopolies.
Yes.
Okay.
And so when you see too many monopolies or monopolistic behavior, then you start to see growing inequality. And so you want to look at what the other side of the equation is. How are you building small companies, and how are you making sure that people aren't locking in markets and essentially just taking up too much profit?
Okay, so you're in law school coming out of childcare?
Yes.
Okay, to study antitrust.
Correct.
All right. So how did that lead you to program manager of tech and innovation with the D.C. government?
Yeah, so I started actually in district government at the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, which does all of the regulations for businesses and buildings. And we took a long, close look at business regulation and trying to understand how that could be streamlined and simplified to allow more people to start businesses. And that grew into looking at business development and moving to the Department of Small and Local Business Development.
Okay, so I understand that there is a group called cooperative stakeholders that have met for the last 6 or 7 months or so. How did that form?
So the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development in D.C. released a new economic strategy this March. And as they were building the strategy over the fall, they held a lot of one-time stakeholder meetings trying to understand what were the activities and what were the needs for the full economy. I participated in that very closely, and we took several topics from that to continue discussions where community members still needed to build up their ideas more to figure out what type of support they wanted. And cooperatives was a very sort of hot topic among a number of stakeholders who were seeking interest in sort of how does more support build for a cooperative ecosystem here in the district.
And you just jumped to it, huh?
That's correct.
You said, this is me.
So we do stakeholders in a number of different groups, and it started actually with a very different program, or perhaps a related program. The first program that I worked at DSLBD is the Aspire to Entrepreneurship program. And in that, we were looking at supporting returning citizens, individuals with a criminal record, into opening their own businesses using entrepreneurship as empowerment. And as we built that program, it was very important for that to be stakeholder-led and stakeholder-driven. And we had a very active and supportive stakeholder group there, and we saw the power of community coming together. So both to inform what government is doing, but also to create additional solutions through that networking and by being convened. And so we took the stakeholder model and we've moved that into cooperatives. We're moving that into disability support for disabled business owners. We've moved that into a number of other topics.
Okay, so you have returning citizens, the folks that have been incarcerated, have been in jail, and you're helping them to come, when they come out, to start their own business.
Correct.
What kind of businesses do they start?
So we encourage people when they are looking to start the business to both have a dream of something that they want to do and to find something that with whatever skills and money they have right now will make money. So some of the businesses that we've seen come out, there's an accountant. We have VOW Transportation, which is transportation services for those with disabilities. We have a number of cleaning and services businesses, and people. We have a caterer, and so a number of different businesses all across the board. We didn't restrict it to any sort of industry.
Fantastic. All right. Entrepreneurship. Do you know that in Italy and in Puerto Rico, they have co-ops in the prisons?
So we've heard a little bit about that, and the Aspire program is one of the many reasons that I was interested in cooperatives. It's sort of still at a theorized idea, but we'd love to be able to move more Aspire programming inside of facilities. And one of the things that we thought about is if there was a co-op that helped people work before they opened their business, that might be a very supportive way for people to be able to launch businesses.
In talking about the co-op in Italy, it's a bakery.
Mm-hmm.
And they won some prestigious award, the best Italian bread of some sort. But you have people outside of the prisons in the co-op and people in the prison in the co-op. And so people in the prison are making bread and doing whatever they do, and they're learning how to solve problems and, get along. And they have a job, their owner member, okay, when they get out. And so, like, people coming back to prison was like 3%. So it really, that's in that program. Mm-hmm. And there is a selection process in order to get into the co-op inside the prisons. So that you may say they take the cream of the crop. And so the likelihood of them coming back at first is probably smaller. But when you go from recidivism rate of, I don't know, what is it here? 70, 80%?
Yeah, so there are different numbers because we have a federal number and a local number, so they're working to align those.
Okay. But they're much higher than 3%.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm very much excited about what we could do in the prison system. As you can see, I'm African American, and I have 4 or 5 of my nephews blind, men, and 2 or 3 of great nephews in jail. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to me personally and as in our community and our society to see what we can do to not get so many black men in jail, but also what we can do once they are in there, what they can do to get out.
Yeah, there are a couple of principles that I have learned from the reentry community that I think are important to both what you're saying and, part of how we think about co-op development as well. The first one is this phrase, each one teach one. So the idea of teaching a skill to someone in the reentry community and then that they would pass that skill forward and that knowledge forward to someone else to help create a supportive community. So there's already a strong community aspect within that. But the other thing that we have recognized as we look to support the Aspire program is that DC has a unique situation in terms of facilities where people are incarcerated. And so while in many states people will be incarcerated within state, in DC people are all across the country, which makes both reentry services as well as programs like this a little more challenging.
Right. I remember visiting Lorton, and you'd come in and you'd walk down some steps. And so before you walk down the steps, there's like a gymnasium, 2 gymnasium size full of mostly black men, and you saw almost no gray. Mm-hmm. Okay, and anybody that looked white was normally Latino. Mm-hmm. So it was just amazing walking in there and then taking a survey of who was in the prison. And then when they split that up, the families have to travel all over the U.S. in order to see them. People, I really appreciate what you're doing with the Aspire program. It said here that you are looking to meet people where they are, building community and building community wealth in that program.
Mm-hmm. And those are stakeholder created and driven goals. So part of the stakeholder process was for those who came forward to meetings to really define what they wanted the goals of the program to be, and whether that was the goals of specifically the Aspire program or the larger space of supporting returning citizen entrepreneurs. And I think some of it is to that larger space. So Aspire we're very proud of it. We want to keep building it, but we also recognize that there is space for more programming and different styles of programming as well.
I really like the idea of co-ops inside the prisons, although that would be really hard to say we want these to be for prisoners from D.C. since they're all over, unless we can get co-ops all over the nation, which I would like that too. Let's go to, I'm always fascinated about your background, going from child care to law school to antitrust and then creating entrepreneurs. Because in antitrust, you're trying to look at where there's monopolistic behavior, where people have more control over whatever business that they're in so they can set prices, keep other people out of the business, and make a larger profit is why people like monopolies or oligopolies, I believe, was where you have, instead of one, you have maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 people in it, but you're still getting entry into that market for somebody who's not in it is very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I think what you just mentioned, sort of a term of art in antitrust law is barriers to entry. And barriers to entry can happen for all sorts of different reasons. And they can happen in these large industrial spaces in which you do see monopolists, but they can also happen in small scale spaces as well. So there can be a lot of barriers to entry, and sometimes they're formal and sometimes they're informal. And so part of what we're doing is trying to either knock down barriers or have people innovate their ways either around them or through them or one way or another.
And so the Department of Small and Local Business Development, particularly your innovation area, is helping people identify those and then how to resolve them?
We're trying to. So one of the things that's great about entrepreneurship is that, it takes a lot of creativity and teaches people to be creative and to keep looking through that. So it's not always easy to knock down barriers, but sometimes it's first getting that entrepreneurial mindset. And a lot of the grantees that we work with that run programs really try to train both an ownership mentality and that entrepreneurial mindset. And we find that mindset, even if you choose not to pursue business, can be very valuable in whatever endeavors you're going for, which is why a lot of people are starting to talk about a term intrapreneur. So if you're working in another organization, you could still take that entrepreneurial mindset and make value from it.
Well, I was talking about intrapreneur last night at a dinner. I didn't know that's what it was called. Okay. Yeah, I like that. The mindset. I'm in property management is what I do daytime. And I learned about co-ops, managing housing co-ops. And what I noticed was getting people to go from a tenant mentality to an owner mentality is a huge gap. I mean, it's a large jump to get people to move that. But once you get people to move there, the housing co-op functions so much better. Once that they are owners, they know they're owners. How do you get this entrepreneur mindset to work?
I mean, I think it happens a lot of different ways, but for most people, they catch the bug. And they catch the bug for different reasons. Sometimes they want to be their own boss. Sometimes they're not finding options within the labor market. And a lot of times it's through dreams. They have a dream of something that they want to do, and they know that the only way that they're going to be able to pursue that dream is pursuing it on their own, and so they need to carve their own path. And so it's a very positive space.
Well, we're going to come back and talk about the dreams. We're going to take our first break now, Kate, so we'll be right back.
Washington, D.C.'s News Talk, 1450 AM WOS and 95.9 FM.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oaks. The program is Everything Cooperative. And this morning in studio with us is Kate Mereand. And we're talking about creating co-ops in the district. And the district government is pursuing this through the Department of Small and Local Business Development. And we were talking about dreams before we went off and what would cause people to become an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is really taking a risk, starting a business. Catch the bug. For me, it was wanting to make money. I mean, it's real. And that was my dream, to live in the house and have the car and the clothes and be able to take vacations. And some sense of having to control your own time. Although I found out that in the entrepreneur world, you don't control your time either. Your clients control your time. The bank controls your time. IRS controls your time. So there's a lot of different people to control your time. So we have Patricia on the line. Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I would like to know your hostess name and the phone number where I can contact her later.
You want her name and her phone number where she can contact you later?
Okay.
Yeah, so I can contact her later.
Okay.
Fantastic. You can call the Department of Small and Local Business Development at, let me get this number right, it's 202-727-3900.
Just a second, don't talk to her. 727-3900. And what I ask for?
You can ask to speak with Kate.
Kate. Okay.
Now,
it's for the young people who are just coming from getting out of prison.
Yes, she helps people coming out of prison. They try to get to them as soon as they can.
721-5400.
727
okay.
3900.
Okay, ask for Kate.
Yes. Kate.
72 CATE.
Kate.
727-3900.
That's correct, Patricia.
This is a wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So changing that attitude is critical. It's absolutely, totally critical. My company is Oaks Management, property management company, and we've been working for the last year and a half to make that into a worker-owned cooperative. And getting people to understand employees, going from an employee to an owner, and the additional responsibility of not only doing your job, but also managing the company. We tried it 4 or 5 years ago, and employees decided no, because nobody went up to say, I will be the boss, the head person, so this time it's been more like, how do you do consensus management? And it's just been really, really interesting. I've learned a lot because I've gotten to the place where I end up making decisions and people would come to me and say, what are we going to do? And now it is, I'll go back, well, what do we want to do? I throw it back. But it's been hard for me to make that change also. But it's very, very interesting, this attitude piece. What are some of the kinds of cooperative business particularly are you helping to form?
So, I mean, this is all community driven. So when individuals come forward looking for support, and they may get support from us or they may get support from other community members who are interested in cooperatives. Some of the ones that we have seen lately are daycare cooperatives. Looking at how the daycare workers are potentially owning the entire daycare. There is interest in building a food cooperative of various sorts in Ward 7 or Ward 8. And there may be some support from the city coming for that in the next fiscal year. We're waiting to hear more about that. There is a tech cooperative that is forming. Even in our stakeholder meetings, because we open it up to all forms of co-ops, housing co-ops have come forward saying that they want to look at what the ecosystem is that supports them. And we know that there's already recently there's a new cooperative called Tight Shift Laboring. So that's I believe that's different types of grass cutting and other types of handyman activity. And I believe that Tight Shift is entirely returning citizens.
Well, Tight Shift I've been using for cleaning. They do cleaning services, lawn services. I'm not sure what all they're doing, but I know we're using them for one property to clean that property, and so far it's quite good. We had some issues in the beginning, but what I liked about them is that we just talked about those issues and resolved them. Mainly timing when people come and how to coordinate that with the property and so forth. So
I do think, though, it's interesting as I have learned more about co-ops. Growing up, I knew a lot about agricultural co-ops, which tended to be small businesses coming together to purchase things at economies of scale. But there are a lot of different forms of co-ops. So there are housing co-ops and worker co-ops and business co-ops. And one of the things that we've been curious about is whether or not business co-ops, either for nonprofits or for-profits, can help create economies of scale for very small businesses that may be struggling with some of their overhead costs.
All right, let me stop here and talk at least the definition I have formed for co-ops. Based on whoever owns and controls the business is what type of co-op it is. If it's owned and controlled by the employees, then it's called a worker cooperative. And what I got when you said a daycare co-op and the workers want to own it, then that would be a worker cooperative. Although in Greenbelt, there's a daycare center, and my understanding, this may not be totally true, but my understanding is the people that uses the co-op, the parents own it. And so when the people that uses the products or services own the business, it's called a consumer cooperative. And so food co-ops are an example of consumer co-ops, although they could be owned by the employees, and it's worker cooperative. And there's one I was introduced to in the state of Washington that's both. it was a consumer cooperative, and then they figured out over time how both the employees and the consumers could own the business, so they have both. The other type of consumer co-ops that we know about a lot, and most people don't know that credit unions are co-ops. That's a consumer. It's owned by the people that make the deposits there. And housing co-ops are consumer co-ops. So those are some examples. There's a consumer co-op in D.C. called CPA. It's a group of people that came together, and they were buying the same thing, the economies of scale that you talked about for farmers, mainly for charter schools and churches. Churches were getting ripped off on things like trash collection, copier machines, both in the contract and the amount that they were paying. So by coming together and having a group of people that can negotiate the contract and negotiate the price, so they understand this whole buying process, so they can get a better product at a lower price for their members. And they've done that with electricity, with utilities, copiers, all kinds of different services. Okay, and now they're looking to take that out into other communities. That's in the D.C., Maryland community. So that's the consumer and the worker. So there's also a consumer co-op that just came to D.C. called REI. And that's where people that go hiking and outdoors, and a group of people started that co-op because they could not find I think 40s, maybe 50s, that they could not find the equipment that they wanted. They'd have to go send for outside of the U.S. to buy the equipment. So there was a need, and they formed a co-op, and now it's quite big. So the other two types of co-ops, main co-ops, as you already mentioned, are what the farmers use. And so farmers I don't know how farmers could even work before co-ops because they had to buy products and services they need to plant or to grow their cattle or pigs or whatever they're farming, and then they have to sell them. Mm-hmm. So they have to do all of these things. So they got co-ops that would come together to help them to buy whatever they need, whether that's tractors or gas or feed or fertilizers. And so those cooperatives are called purchasing co-ops. Mm-hmm. And then they do the farming and create whatever they create on their land. And then they created some other co-ops on the other end that sells their products. And Cabot Cheese is in a Cabot Creamery where dairy farmers will send, I think I heard 900 dairy farmers. It might have been 9,000 or 9. Mm-hmm. I don't know, get out of the numbers here. So they would send all of their milk to Cabot Cheese, so they know who's going to buy it. Now, Cabot Cheese or Cabot Creamery can send milk or cheese out through markets that the farmers could not do. Mm-hmm. So it's a fantastic way of both buying what they need, economies of scale. People, if they buying things in volume, they get a lower price and normally a better product. And then they can sell it and get a better product because they can have more markets to go at. Yeah. So it works so extremely well.
And my understanding, which may not be entirely accurate, is that a lot of the farming co-ops actually came about sort of in the wake of the Industrial Revolution. So when the economy changed from an agrarian economy to an industrial economy, we didn't have as many laborers and as many workers in those spaces, and there was a lot more need to look at how the agricultural community was going to come back from a major shift in the way that it operated. And so that was a transformation. And one of the reasons that, when I think about that shift in the agrarian economy, we are also now changing from an industrial economy to whatever term you want to give it, whether it's digital or information or IT or technology. But there's clearly a shift away from an industrial economy to something else that's happening. But there are still types of businesses that will need to exist, just like types of farmers needed to exist. And they may need to look at how they are doing their businesses differently in order to achieve market rates.
So how we're going to do things differently in this environment for returning citizens or people out there in the community that may not have a job, they can find work by creating their own businesses, come together. We're going to take our second break. If you have any questions, you can call in at 1-800-450-7876, and we'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
Washington, D.C.'s News Talk, 1450 AM WOS and 95.9 FM.
This is Vernon Oaks. Welcome back. We are talking about creating co-ops in Washington, D.C., creating businesses, entrepreneurship, jobs, businesses, wealth. And Kate Mereand is our guest today. And if you needed to reach her, you can call her at 202-727-3900. If you have any information that you want to, the Aspire program is returning citizens, coming back in and creating entrepreneur spirits, getting them to get the right mindset for owning their own business or being an entrepreneur inside a larger company. Once you catch the bug, okay, getting things done and being creative. You have to be creative if you're going to be an entrepreneur. And also removing the barriers to entry is some of the things that we've talked about. But Kate, let's go back. This daycare co-op, I know that there's two in the area. One is in Greenbelt and one is on Capitol Hill, housed inside of a school. And I've tried to get them on the program, but unsuccessfully. How would this daycare co-op work, or what are they envisioning? So,
and it's interesting because I'm not familiar with the one on Capitol Hill. We haven't connected yet, but there is a forming daycare cooperative near Logan Circle that has, it came out of a housing cooperative, and it has a lot of grant support that's coming in. And many of these women who are looking to start the daycare cooperative are ESL, so they are Spanish language speakers. And so they're getting support with translation, they're getting support with organizing. So a number of different groups have come in to help support what the creation of the co-op would look like, including the UDC Law School for legal resources and other spaces.
Do you know who's working at the UDC Law School, who they're working with?
So it's the clinic, and I believe that is either Dean or Professor Louise Howells.
Louise House is the name I was looking for because I've worked with her before. She's quite good.
And the question of legal resources, given that I have a legal background, has been one that we've been very interested in finding out more information about, because we have not found a lot of lawyers who support cooperative development or have that skill set. I think they may be here in the district. We just haven't found them yet. But that's clearly an important element of creating cooperatives.
It's interesting in the housing co-ops. Rick Eisen just knows a whole lot in the housing co-op. And there's a guy, O'Toole, I can't remember his first name, who was also very knowledgeable about housing co-ops. But I don't know who would be in terms of starting co-ops, like the worker co-ops that we were talking about or other co-ops. Who would know it? Louis House seemed like would be a good person to start with at UDC. Okay, that's the daycare center. It's starting out of a housing co-op, so that gets to the sixth principle, cooperation among co-ops, where you're in one co-op and then you start another one. In Logan Circle, okay, that's high rent district now too. What about the food co-op?
So we understand that there is a group, I believe it is in historic Anacostia, that has been working for a couple of years to start a food co-op, hopefully a grocery store. And they're doing organizing efforts right now, and they're very active in the stakeholder group. But I think with their volunteer organizers right now, they're just at the space of marketing. And I think one of the challenges that many of the stakeholders bring forward is that not a lot of people know what co-ops are, or they only think of housing co-ops. And so they're looking for places to just expose people to the co-op idea, so that they can help then have people buy into building out a co-op.
I've had Damien Bascom on the show. He's a great young man, a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. And he's helping to create this community grocery co-op. And if you would like to get information they have monthly meetings every second Saturday. You could go on their website, communitygrocerycoop@gmail.com. And their telephone number is 202-567-7498. You could become a member. You can join the board, become a volunteer, help spread the word. There was a co-op in North Carolina, I think Greensboro, North Carolina. It took them 4 years, a food co-op to get started, the Renaissance Cooperative. So it takes time to get people to understand what a co-op is, to understand how much the buy-in, the second principle is of co-ops is you put money in. There's an economic piece. You put money in, and you can also, when there's a profit, you can get money out in terms of dividends. So I'm not sure what the buy-in here. In Renaissance, it was $100. And I think they got about 1,000 people involved. And then they got the city to help put up some money or guarantee loans for them. And they've opened up. I want to get down there to look at their co-op. A Piggly Wiggly left the community. And so this warehouse, the grocery store space that I think 10, 12, 15 years, it just sat there. Okay. And then it was a desert. There was no fresh fruits and vegetables. So they created a co-op in there. Where members are owners. Okay. What about, you said some housing co-ops? I know Anita Barnes had a hearing on limited equity co-ops, were affordable housing co-ops, Councilman Anita Barnes, and they're starting a stakeholders meeting for that.
I haven't heard about that yet.
Okay. To try to figure out, because a lot of the smaller housing co-ops have a very, very hard time with management. They 4 units, 10 units really cannot afford management companies, and too often, and then they don't know how to manage it. And if you get 1 or 2 people that don't pay, they don't work. So just trying to get them the help that they need so they can survive. And it creates a nice living space and very affordable living.
I think that's it's why it's interesting to see the housing co-ops come forward to the stakeholders group, because in the stakeholders group, they're really looking at, can they start either a peer-to-peer network, or can they start some sort of co-op development center, trying to understand where is the best space and where can they start to build up centralized resources for cooperatives in the district.
There is another group that's forming at the Ella Jo Baker Intentional Community Co-op in, where would that be? 14th and Belmont, up in that area. And they've met 3 or 4 times in their limited equity co-ops, I think mainly limited equity co-ops, forming to try to, and these are the cooperators themselves. Matter of fact, they didn't want anybody else. I went to 2 meetings and they kicked me out. Okay, they said, we only want cooperators in here. And I understand that. They want to be able to talk openly and then try to figure out what their needs are and then how they would solve them. So I said, if you need our help in any kind of way, then let us know. So there's a group forming there. And like I said, Anita Barnes had hearings on co-ops, limited equity particularly, and now they're starting a group there. So what about the technology group co-op?
So that's an interesting project. I think started by 2 individuals who, they have full-time work within tech spaces in larger companies here in the district. But as they wanted to create what some people refer to as a side hustle, they wanted to do work in addition to their regular work. They wanted to figure out what was the best format to work with about 6 or 8 individuals who would be doing small projects. And they were very excited and interested in the co-op idea. And so particularly one member who's been working with the rest of them to say this is what it would look like if we had a co-op of sort of tech-skilled individuals running projects for individuals. So that way it's essentially a number of freelancers coming together, creating strength amongst them.
What would be the technology?
So I think a lot of it is either web development or app development or data analysis.
Okay. What's also interesting is, particularly for the worker co-op, I've heard of engineering companies come together. You could have, when workers own it, any kind of company. And now there's another great piece for you to look at. I went to a conference in Cincinnati 3 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago, out of a group called One Worker, One Vote, cooperatives. But they're looking at, there's a lot of, what are we called? Our group of 60 and 70 and 80-year-olds that own businesses. And one way to sell their business is to sell it to the employees. And they form a co-op. Mm-hmm. You can have an ESOP or a co-op. The difference between an ESOP, that they may not control the business. They may own it or a portion of it, but they may not control it. But in a co-op, they can control and own the business.
When we've talked to national co-op policy individuals, they've often referenced that type of cooperative, and some people have been very interested in exploring that here in the district. We haven't to date really had very many business owners or others who have touch points on business owners who are reaching retirement come to the stakeholders group. be very welcome to come out. We do those monthly. They're currently happening at the Hive 2.0 in historic Anacostia. And so we'd be very happy to support that because we know that that's a major space, but we haven't found any of the business owners who might be interested. And I'll mention one other type of sort of cooperative that sort of attaches to the tech cooperative. We haven't seen it yet, though I think I'm starting to hear a little bit about it. About 2 years ago, I went to a conference on platform cooperativism, and that's sort of the question of what if the Uber drivers owned Uber, and understanding what some of these new spaces are where people are getting into gig work or 1099 work, and that's similar to the tech cooperative. Why do you necessarily need someone who's taking profit if you could put that profit across all the people who are doing the work? You don't need that much from the centralized space, or that's the theory.
So that Uber or Lyft or could be a co-op.
So that was the theory. And there are a number of different types of gig economy work that could come forward for that.
Okay. Now, you said quickly where you're meeting. Can you go back to where you're meeting? Yeah,
so it's going to be at the Hive 2.0. That's at 1231 Good Hope Road in historic Anacostia, so that's southeast. We'll be doing that on Friday, July 28th from 1 to 3:30 p.m. There are Eventbrite listings on it, and I believe that the Hive is also cross-listing that.
Friday, July 28th from what time?
1 to 3:30.
Okay, July 28th from 1 to 3:30 at 1230 Good Hope Road, Southeast.
Correct.
It's called the Hive. And that's where also Damien meets on Saturday.
Correct.
At the same location, 3 to 5, if I recall. I think that's when they meet. So if you're interested in the community grocery co-op, you could go to the Hive at 1231 Good Hope Road, Southeast, the third Saturday of each month, I think is what he told me, from 3 to 5. Okay. Okay, so we talked about tight ship already. Are there any other types of co-ops that you could see? I would like to see Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and different government or pseudo-government businesses become co-ops.
That's interesting. At this point in time, we're helping to just raise the awareness of cooperatives. And, I think I haven't heard anyone come forward and say that any particular type of business couldn't work as a co-op. So it just seems like another form of corporate structure and corporate ownership for how something is put together.
See, the reason if you have a government entity that's doing work and you look at the employees that are doing that work, if they own the business, it seemed like there would be a greater buy-in to the product and the services, that they would produce a better product and service once they know they own it and their name is to it. So you'd perhaps get out of the bureaucracy of government-owned businesses, okay? And you could get things done better. But also, if they're the profit, they could share in that profit in creating the wealth that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. We haven't seen any examples, but various different stakeholders have theorized the question of whether or not cooperatives could start as public-private partnerships and then the government be bought out over time. I don't know if that's advisable. We haven't really studied it, but has been theorized.
That's a great idea. I like the idea. I like the concept. Why co-ops? There's a book created by Democracy Collaborative. It's called Cities Building Community Wealth. And we're going to talk about that when we come after the next break and look at how you finance co-ops and how you get them started. But we're going to take our last and final break. The hour goes by real quick, Kate. I think we could talk 2 or 3 hours here. So we will want to have you back. We are getting ready to take our next break. Please call if you have any questions or comment. 1-800-450-7876.
Washington, D.C.'s News Talk, 1450 AM WOF and 95.9 FM.
Information is power, and that's why the National Cooperative Bank sponsors this program. NCB's mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities, by providing innovative financial and related services. And they do a great job. If you have need for a loan, you could contact NCB at ncb.coop. So, Kate is in studio with us today from the D.C. government. And you know, Kate, New York has put in their budget last year $2.5 million to create worker-owned cooperatives, and this year is $2.6 million. And the city of Madison, Wisconsin, put $1 million a year for 5 years in their budget to create co-ops. And I would really like to see the district do something like that. I got a big smile from her. I think she's in agreement.
So I mean, briefly to sort of budgeting that happens across city government. So I'm a staff member in one of the agencies, and so that's above my pay grade. But one of the things that we like to do through stakeholders is, help people who want to advocate for certain things just meet each other and decide, how they want to take those pieces forward. So cooperatives is a piece of my time. We want to make sure that it sort of stays on the table and on the agenda. But when it comes to a question of budget, that's definitely comes into the political process, which is away from my work.
Okay. All right. We'll take that on. We'll keep it up. I keep presenting it so we can get to. I'm just pleased that you are doing this. I talked to Vincent Gray and his staff. As you know, he has 23 laws up where he's getting money to build a hospital in Ward 8. He has $300 million budgeted, and he needs 336. And he also has some laws to build a couple of stores, one in Ward 7, a grocery store, and one in Ward 8, because those are considered food deserts. So I've talked to them and testified that perhaps he could, with the same money, build 4 co-ops because they come in lower boxes. They don't need as much space for a co-op normally. But the benefits of co-ops, I mean, why a co-op?
So, I mean, I think for cooperatives, I think it does a few things. It allows more people to share in the profit, so potentially to increase their wages if they're working in a co-op. And it also allows a lot more voice in terms of what the services and the products are. So if you're really looking to align a business to community needs, that community voice helps make sure that the products and the services are both at the right price point and actually the ones that they can take up. And, I don't know as much about this point, but we hear that, for individuals who want to put sweat equity in, particularly at the beginning, that sweat equity can then translate into dollars. So if they don't have dollars to invest in something, they can use their sweat equity in order to receive products and services.
There's another reason. The co-ops, if you go to a grocery store, and I forgot where Safeway headquarters and Giants headquarters and Harris Teeter's headquarters, but they're not in the district. And if you had a co-op, the people that live in the district own and operate that co-op, so the money stays inside the district. And it may turn 6, 7, 8 times inside the district, where when you go and buy at one of these other stores, the profit goes right out. Mm-hmm. Some of the money in terms of salaries may stay in the district, but the profit goes right out.
And there are a few other pieces particularly with grocery stores, that sort of attach to our Aspire program as we look at that. We have a number of people who have CDLs and are drivers. And then there are a number of forming urban gardeners, which are being strongly supported by the University of District of Columbia or doing it on their own. But we have a growing and soon to be thriving urban ag scene. And so being able to have local produce, being able to close the circle on food waste and just have an entire ecosystem around food and have that food be of recipes and of types of food that people really want. It gets a lot closer to communities if it's local.
So at the hearing for Reverend Gray, Councilmember Gray's laws, the 23 laws that he has in place, it was very interesting. It was started at 11, supposed to have been over at 1. I testified after about 60 other people at 4 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I was able to sit there for 5 hours and listen to testimony. And almost all of it talked about the ecosystem. You can't just build a hospital and get better health. You've got to have good food, and you have to have exercise. And they talked about why people don't have food. I mean, they put freezers. I would walk in when we do inspection. I see freezers. Why do you have freezers? Maybe they have a lot of meat. And they said, no, you have to get a taxi to go 10, 15, 20 minutes away to buy groceries. Mm-hmm. And so that's expensive, and so they'll buy a lot and then freeze it so they'll have it. Mm-hmm. I never thought about that. And so all of the problems when you don't have grocery stores local. So it was absolutely amazing. So we had 4 reasons: money, create wealth; voice, and I call that social wealth. You learn how to talk and solve problems inside the community, and learn how to talk to politicians and police officers. You get sweat equity turned into dollars, and you build community. There was a lady on the program, I think you would like this, Kate, a lady from the UK who was the president of the International Cooperative Alliance, and she said co-ops bring people out of poverty with dignity. Mm-hmm. And I really, really like that. I've had a lot of sayings on this program, but that was the one that I like best.
And I think maybe some of that has to do with the question of risk when we were talking about entrepreneurship in an earlier segment. Part of entrepreneurship is being able to manage risk and be able to take on risk. And sometimes you can't take it on yourself, but when you take on risk with others, it's one of the first ways in which you mitigate risk.
So in this book, I started talking about cities building community wealth. They talk about Christina, an immigrant from Mexico who lives in New York, has a couple children, and she was cleaning houses. And kind of like as a maid making $7 an hour. They created a co-op, and her hourly wage went from $7 to $20. And so that's what I would like to see. Now, when I've talked about this, I'll get people say, that doesn't happen all the time. Okay, I got that. Mm-hmm. But if it happened one time for this one family. So what Christina did, what they talk about here is she worked less hours so she could have time with her family. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I thought it gave her the opportunity to have that balance of family. I don't know if she was working 50 or 60 hours a week and then she cut it back to 30 or 40, but you can do a lot when you triple your income. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I don't know Christina's story, but we do know that there are a lot of people who are engaged in self-entrepreneurship who may be in the informal economy. They may not have licensed businesses, and it's a lot harder to seek assistance, whether it's financial assistance through a loan, whether it's through marketing and business development assistance through the city. And so cooperatives are a way for people to first get into the licensed economy for self-employment and for small businesses as well. And so it is, that helps people learn just the legal landscape of how do you go about following all the compliance with a lot of different laws as it's mm-hmm. coming in, because that can be built into the cooperative. And so that may be one of the elements, if not in Christina's story, then in stories that are similar to hers.
Well, what is so interesting, I like if we could go fairly often, 50% of the time, where you could raise people's job rate from 7 to 20. I like that better than going to the minimum wage to 15. And the reason raising the minimum wage, my sense of it is that all the products and services will raise. So you can get inflation mm-hmm. when you raise the minimum wage. In this way, one of the reasons that this is able to go so high is they take the administration and management out of the middle with their profit motive. And they share that. Now, she could also be cleaning the houses, but she also perhaps has to have some time to help manage the business, mm-hmm. which gives them that ability to raise that money.
And potentially to market their services to a broader audience, because she's not marketing just her services, they are marketing the services of the co-op, and so they're able to get a wider spread.
I like that. Now, the research I did about food co-ops is they only have a dollar spread. There's $1 more that the workers in a food co-op get over and above what in a grocery store person makes. But there was also 10 to 15% of the people in the food co-op more had health benefits, mm-hmm. more than in a grocery store.
Yeah, and they have access to the food that is in the store.
Right.
Yeah, margins on food businesses all across are very tight, and so it's an ever rising efficiency game in terms of food. But there are different ways to find efficiency. So at the large scale, when someone is looking for efficiency, they may be cutting middlemen out and doing other questions like that. But efficiency at a small scale level may be how do you make the most of food that may go to waste otherwise.
Do you like what you're doing?
Yes, I love it.
Why?
Because, having grown up in rural America, which was struggling, and really thinking about, how do communities come together and sort of build for themselves was something that I took there. And when I came to DC many years ago, really thinking about how those same principles are exactly the same, whether you're in a rural or an urban context.
It's the same. We only have a minute or so left. What message would you like to leave people with?
I think co-ops are a fantastic and interesting way to think about getting into entrepreneurship. But whether it's through entrepreneurship, cooperatives, really looking towards the future and where is community wealth built, just starting to think about what that looks like and how you want to build that in your community.
So however you want to build it, you could contact Kate at the Department of Small and Local Business Development. She's in charge of technology and innovation at 202-727-3900. Thank you for joining in today. Kate, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation. I'd love to have you back. And you all have a great week. Live cooperatively.
Washington, D.C.'s News Talk, 1450 AM WOF and 95.9 FM.